You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
After 3 days of unrest, confrontation, and violence, the mayor and the city manager declared a state of emergency and imposed a curfew, in combination with efforts by a variety of community leaders. Over the next 4 nights, relative calm returned to the streets, if not to the hearts of Cincinnatians. Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. After what must be ranked as the most unsettling event in the area in the last 3 decades, where do we stand? What were the options available at various stages in the sequence of events? What were the forces at work behind closed doors? And most importantly, how do we move forward? The second part of the program will be devoted entirely to the future. But we begin this morning with the man who found himself at the center of things. To briefly discuss the events of the last 2 weeks and the path towards the future, I'm joined by the mayor of Cincinnati, Charlie Luken. Charlie, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you very much, Dan.
First part here, I just want to go over a few things that I still have questions about.
Okay.
Going into that meeting Monday morning, Monday afternoon 2 weeks
Right.
ago, Public Safety Law
Right.
Committee, how much strategizing had been done about what council should do going into that meeting? Or how much did you just get caught flat-footed?
Well, I think we got caught a little flat-footed. I mean, we knew it was going to be a tense meeting. We've been in tense meetings before. I think we misjudged the level of anger in the crowd, and so when the chairman tried to do some regular business before getting to the speakers, it just became anarchy, and we did not have control.
Going into that meeting, did anybody sit down and say, let's go in there and be prepared to announce a package of things, changes, you know? If, for example, Kent Ryan really had already asked to be reassigned, couldn't it have been possible to say you're going to remove the safety director, that you're going to put back on the ballot this proposal to change the way we select the police, and you know, that there could have been a series of things.
I think we did the proposal. You'd have to go back and look at the timeline, because frankly, some of the timeline
it gets confusing.
It gets confusing to me. But the answer to your question is this. I think had we been able to measure the level of anger and frustration at that meeting, it might be we would have handled it differently. But you know, looking back at the events, Dan, you could second guess everything that happened.
Right.
I mean, we thought we were going into a meeting, and I went to the meeting. I don't normally go to law committee meetings. I thought enough about what was going on to know that I wanted to be at that meeting. But I couldn't, there was no way to know what was going to take place after that. So yeah, if you call it flat-footed, that's okay. But every bit of this has been second-guessed in hindsight.
Okay, and I don't want to second guess exactly, but I
mean,
want to just, I'm trying
to,
I'm trying to figure out what was in people's minds. Going before the shooting, this last shooting, and you know, how we describe these 15 events that are put together by different people in different ways.
Right.
Had council or the administration issued any changes, now this is before the shooting, any changes in policy to the police based on earlier events, was there any, had the police been told over the last 3-4 months to change the way they handled certain things?
I mean, they were not told, for example, not to chase somebody who was wanted on open warrants. Their training was reemphasized to them. The shots fired policy had not changed, and basically, and I'm overstating it, but the shots fired policy is if you feel like you're in threat for your life, you shoot, and you don't shoot to wound, you shoot to kill. That is the shots fired policy. Now, that had not been reviewed. I think what was reviewed and emphasized was their training, the need not to escalate situations, and that had been worked on.
You know, one of the questions that constantly gets raised here is the fact that these were 14 misdemeanors that were involved.
Right.
How could somebody who was wanted on open warrants, admittedly, but for misdemeanors and who had no history of carrying a gun or being violent, how could this have happened? Are these sorts of chases that resulted in this particular shooting, are these common, or was there anything unusual about this one?
I don't know how many of these happen. I think it's fair to say that when an officer gets a call that somebody's got 14 warrants, And they go, in this particular case, I think by the time of the shooting, there had been 12 officers responded.
Yes, I mean, there's
I
really...
mean, this is a big chase going on.
Right.
And I think all of these things, Dan, will be reviewed, but it is very difficult to tell a police officer on the street, you find somebody with 14 warrants, let him go. And that really is what people are kind of asking the question. Should you chase, in those circumstances, somebody who has...
Because the way this whole thing was triggered, as I understand it, was the police officer who recognized
yeah, Mr. Thomas.
Obviously must have known the sorts of warrants he was wanted for. I
think that comes up on the screen.
Yeah, so I think that's, you know, and I see this as potentially parallel to a number of years ago. A lot of jurisdictions decided it wasn't worth doing these high-speed chases, and just because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, a lot of times they don't catch them, and if they do catch them, a lot of times somebody gets hurt in the process. But I mean, I think all that will be under review.
Okay.
But no, that had not changed.
One other question.
Yes, sir.
About the past, and that is, a lot of people have raised the question about why you didn't impose a curfew 24 hours earlier than you did and call in help from the state police. And I am really looking at hindsight here. I admit on this one. I'm not just asking you about policy at the time or where you were at the time, but
well, Dan,
how do you look on that?
The only thing I would say is that some people still argue I should have never imposed a curfew. I mean,
why did somebody must have been proposing that?
Well, absolutely. No, not really. In fact, at that particular point in time, there was a feeling among some of us, including some of our folks in safety, that a curfew at that particular moment might have made things worse. Now, I know that sounds in light of what, because the curfew could have been seen as another violation, and at least the safety folks thought for that period of time that they might be able to get the situation back under control. Now, in hindsight, I'm not sure. I do agree with you about one thing. In hindsight, I might have got the highway patrol down here a little quicker, but I did not, and I'm glad I did not, call in the National Guard or ask for National Guard help, and I did not simply because of the advice I'd received from the governor's office and others that these folks are not trained to deal with these kind of circumstances. So a lot of decisions were made. They were made very quickly. And, you know, was the curfew too soon, too late? You know, did you know how many people were going to be at that law committee meeting? All of these things happened very quickly.
One final quick question on, as you're making those quick decisions, who are the people that were closest to you in advising you?
Well, the city manager, the police chief, the safety department, the other department heads are involved. And then I'm trying very hard to talk to people in the community, and I don't want to get into names, but you know, there are people who you see who have been on TV who are involved in the community, and I'm trying to talk to them to keep them, because you can't just do it by listening to the people in city employment. You have to be listening, and one of the reasons was the combination of, I didn't impose the curfew sooner, was a combination of what safety was saying to me and what they were telling me on the street.
Okay, and introducing this idea of people from the community leads right into where we're going. Stay right there. Stay tuned. On Monday, the mayor announced his intention to name a new commission. After the break, Charlie and I will be joined by two possible members of that commission.
I am chartering a diverse, high-level commission to define how we should do this and how we should make recommendations. This commission will draw from all sectors of our community, including religious, education, business, and community leaders. This can't be another commission that writes another report that simply gathers dust. This commission must be empowered to stick with the process until the results are delivered.
On Monday, Charlie Luken announced his intention to name a Race Relations Commission. In a tremendous outpouring of civic goodwill in the first 24 hours after that announcement, over 100 people volunteered to serve. The members of the commission have not yet been announced, but the potentially pivotal role of this commission might play in the future of our region made it the logical focus of this morning's program. I've invited two community leaders who very well might end up on the commission to join the mayor and me to talk about the opportunities and challenges we face. Ross Love is the president and CEO of Blue Chip Broadcasting, a former P&G executive. Father Michael Graham is a Jesuit priest and the new president of Xavier University. Welcome to Newsmakers. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, Dan.
Ross, you've been around the city a long time. You've seen other commissions operate. What does this one have to do, or how does this have to be different maybe than other commissions if it's going to be effective?
It has to do several things that are going to be very different. First, it really needs to get a broad base of input up front. There has to be grassroots input for both a range of people in the African American community and the white community. Second, it can't be a commission that works for months and months and months and then issues a report. It has to be a commission that is constantly coming up with answers and implementing on the run so that we're not waiting to see results. And third, in the end, it has to truly address with a results, action-oriented focus the broad range of root causes, whether it be employment and economic inclusion, education, and a range of youth-oriented needs, the media and the images that it portrays. And maybe most important, there needs to be continuing effort to create a positive relationship between our police officers and the communities they're working within. If we can accomplish those things, then this will be different, but it has to create results and meaningful action.
Mike, this is a huge area and complicated. As you imagine, as you've been thinking about this over the past couple weeks, how much of this is going to focus on police-community relations as opposed to this broader background issue of race relations generally in our community?
Dan, the way I look at it, there's an integral relationship between those two kinds of questions, that all of the, there's a whole set of underlying issues which Ross has just described: economic inclusion, education, housing, a sense of ownership of one's own neighborhood, all of that sort of stuff. The situation of the relationship between the community and the police sits on top of that in a very volatile kind of way. And so those underlying issues, I think, help to make a potentially explosive situation, in fact, explosive, as we've witnessed recently. So there needs to be a number of tracks down which this commission goes, I think, in order to address those long-range root causes, as well as to address the very, very powerful, very real issue of police-community relations.
You know, in terms of composition of the commission, one of the things that a lot of people, Charlie, you mentioned this to me on Tuesday, but other people have mentioned it as well, we need to get young people involved in some sort of, you're a college president. What are you hearing from the people, the students that you interact with all the time over the last couple of weeks about this?
Exactly that kind of thing, Dan, frankly. Last night we had the first opportunity on campus to have a kind of mass meeting. There were perhaps 300 students who showed up on the spur of the moment, really, with short notice about it. And I heard that over and over and over again from them, that this is a situation where they want their voices to be heard. They believe that they have a positive vision that needs to be listened to in the middle of all of this. Ross has heard that same thing downtown, I know. Not to listen to those voices would be to begin making a huge mistake and wind up down the road with some other incident like this, and all of us wringing our hands about it.
Ross, how do you imagine finding the right people, not just the young people, but the young people included? How do you identify the right people? And I know we got to go back to Charlie here in a moment to ask about this, because ultimately the mayor has to do these appointments. But how do you imagine the composition of this commission?
Well, it's not an easy process. It has to have several factors. First, there has to be the involvement of people who are going to take the responsibility for making things happen. In other words, those who ultimately have the ability to create change have to be involved, have to be participant in it. There has to be real expertise in each of these areas, whether it's education or employment or business development or police community relations. There have to be true experts, local experts involved. And third, there really needs to be an involvement of grassroots and young people, both the African American and from the broader community. that will provide the richness of input and again, credibility. I mean, this commission has to be credible going in, and then by its actions, it will engender respect and credibility coming out.
Charlie, how large do you, I mean, size is always an issue. On the one hand, you want to put a lot of people working on this. On the other hand, you can't make it too overbearing and clumsy. What do you imagine the shape of this?
I don't know exactly how it's going to look right now. There are a number of areas where you might get into even a committee structure because of the various areas that Ross and Father Graham have talked about. But let me underscore one very important point. I mean, Ross was talking about why this is going to be different, and Father Graham was talking about why is, Ross has been involved in this, putting all this together, and it's been tremendously helpful in the early days of our disturbances. But you know what? Neither one of these guys want to sit on a commission that's just going to issue a report and say, here, and one of the things from the very beginning that Ross has insisted on, I'm not playing that game again. And that's what people are telling me. We're just not playing that. So don't even trot it out again. So I think that's the assurance that this is not going to be the same thing, and the fact that the level of commitment, and that's why we've taken a little time to put this together, because before we get out there, we are going to make certain that we have the support in place to make it an effective group. We're not getting out there until we're absolutely certain we have that support.
And that's what's different here. I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I didn't sense the true commitment from the mayor and others in city government, and particularly from the business community, which has to be an important resource. People are saying, this time we have to see meaningful action. And they're talking about putting the resources in place up front and doing the follow-through to see things implemented. And that's why this has a chance to be truly different from what's occurred in the past.
It's as if somehow everyone's eyes have been opened, I think. People would acknowledge that this problem has been here for a long time, and it's taken the episodes of the past week to convince people that we can't afford to fail. We can't afford to have another report that sits on yet another shelf.
The interesting thing too is it's not only have the issues been here, but lots of organizations in one way or another have been trying to work on these issues. Not only police-community relations, but these underlying issues, jobs, housing, etc. If you look over the topics on Newsmakers for the last 4.5 years, so it's a question of pooling and focusing maybe the resources that are already out there, the actions that are already out there, in some sort of new way. I mean, it's not like we're starting from ground zero here.
No, and this community is full of goodwill. But I looked the other day at the reports that have been done on racism or racial unrest in the city, and there have been several. I mean, we're not starting from ground zero, but where we are starting from ground zero is with a renewed and refreshed commitment that insists, because as Father Graham said, and I think that is the key point, we can't afford to fail. We can't afford to fail because we got too many young kids at risk. We can't afford to fail because pretty soon this is going to start costing our community jobs. The economy is going to be affected, and whether you live in Over the Rhine or Mason, pretty soon, if we don't do something about this, it's going to affect your life.
One of the, you can have all the commitment and all of the determination, whatever. It's still going to take some time for this commission to have any sort of impact at all, no matter how fast things move and how things are rolled out. They don't have to all just wait for one final report. What about in the interim? Ross, what do some things are there some things that can be done even before this commission is
I think there's some critically important things that can be done in literally the weeks, the first couple of weeks as we move forward. First of all, we need to begin a dialogue that will change the relationship on the street next week between the police officers and our young people.
How do you do that, though?
Well, I think it's going to take leadership from the top of the police force. We need the police chief and his top officers to send a message and to change some
I'm going to ask you a tough question on that, because I've had Tom Stryker on this show a lot, and I'll just tell you where I am. My gut is that he would be cooperative with that. But it seems to me that it's not just Stryker and the leadership, it's the FOP and people like Keith Fangman who often are issuing a different sort of message. And do you have to change that message too? You have to get somehow him involved in a different way.
I think there has to be more civility, coming from the FOP and from all quarters. But if we can get to a point where the police officers, even when they're interacting with the young people, are being more conscious to be more courteous, are avoiding unnecessary physical confrontation, are willing to, you know, in a sense, back off a little bit and let this thing cool down. And on the other hand, if when they do that, we can get the message through the community that our young people need to respond to common courtesy with common courtesy, I think we can begin a building process literally in the weeks ahead. But there have to be changes. We need to make sure that there are no more potentially life-taking confrontations like the one that occurred last Saturday that became the flashpoint for all this. And that means we will need to change some procedures around how misdemeanor violations are pursued so they never get to that point. And that's possible to do. It takes leadership from the top of the police force.
Let me go back to Charlie on that, you know, because that's related to the question I had asked in the first part about had any changes been made before the Thomas shooting. Now, is it possible right now, given what we've got, the structure we got, to implement the sorts of things that Ross is saying?
We are reviewing already our use of force policies and how those are affected on the street. I think one of the things Ross is talking about also is an attitude of approach and a daily approach that police officers, how they interface with citizens. I would also say, and I would add to what Ross has said, is that a lot of the police officers in the CPD right now feel like they are being convicted without a trial. So that is another piece of this puzzle, and another reason why I remain concerned about what's going on the street right now. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, isn't it nice to have this over with?" It's not over. No part of this is over.
Absolutely. And I think we got to remember, as said many times, this is not just a black-white issue. It's a black-white-blue issue, because the police really do see themselves from a different perspective. Mike, you were saying that the events of the last couple of weeks have changed people's perspective on what had already existed. Do you imagine the commission might be able to change, you know, to do another sort of paradigm shift by, you know, I think of a place like Atlanta, you know, and even something like, and if they mean it, you know, a city too busy to hate. They don't have time. Is that part of the role of this commission, is to change the way we see each other and the way we think about these issues that aren't going to go away?
The commission really has to sort of be the midwife, as it were, of larger change within the community, I think. There's a way in which that change, whatever it is, has to operate within the distinct history of this particular community. We're not Atlanta. We're not other cities that one could name. We're Cincinnati. We have the history that we do. We have the issues that we do. At the same time, what has to happen, I think, going back to Ross's point of civility, I think is going to be required on all parts, really. You know, my fear in one way is that people will kind of talk past one another, and we've got to learn to listen to each other in some ways, such that we're not simply boiling things down to some least common denominator and finding some shred of consensus somewhere. But there's going to be a need for almost a kind of conversion on people's parts, that it's not his problem, it's not her problem, it's not their problem, it's my solution. And I have to be a part of that.
And there's a parallel with Atlanta here. Atlanta made a decision literally right after Martin Luther King was assassinated to make a change. And it was to create true inclusiveness in the economic structure and in the decision-making structure, both in the private and in the public sectors. And that was a city that made a point-in-time decision to change things by bringing people together. And they also changed attitudes and did become more civil toward one another. Courtesies came into play, but it was undergirded by fundamental actions, and that's what we have to do.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I thank all of you for being here this morning, and believe me, we will follow the progress of this commission and have you back, or whoever the right people are, have you back on Newsmakers as you move forward. So thank you very much. Tomorrow night, there will be a Findlay Market History Fair. The fair, which was planned months ago, will be held at 7:30 at Memorial Hall at 225 Elm Street. For all those people who see Findlay Market as one of the few patches of common ground where people of all races, all economic backgrounds regularly come together in Cincinnati, this could be part of the healing process. I'll be giving a short history about the talk of the market, plug, plug. Others will talk briefly about the architecture and the future of the market, but more importantly, the centerpiece will be inviting all those people who have worked at the market and shopped at the market over the years to bring photographs, bring memorabilia, and share them and begin talking with each other. Hopefully, it will be a very mixed group, and you're welcome to be there. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women who are shaping our community for the future.